Have you ever wondered what's really behind those huge economic headlines? The ones about national growth, unemployment, or inflation? Well, you're stepping right into the world of macroeconomics, the study of the entire economy, the big picture. Let's jump in.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with that high-level view, then figure out how we actually measure an economy with something called GDP. After that, we'll tackle the problem of inflation, check out the tools we use to manage it all, and finally, get into why this is all such a tricky balancing act.
So what does it really mean to study the whole economy? The best way to get your head around it is to think about that classic saying, you can't see the forest for the trees.
And this really nails the difference. Microeconomics is all about focusing on the individual trees, how a single company sets its prices or your own personal budget. But for this, we're zooming way, way out to look at the entire forest. As the economist Gardner Ackley put it, macroeconomics is about the total output, overall employment, and the general price level for the whole system. It's the big picture.
So that brings up a pretty important question. If we're studying this huge economic forest, how do we actually figure out how big it is? Or how healthy it is? Well, the main tool we use for that is something called gross domestic product, or GDP. To put it simply, GDP is just the total value of everything a country produces in 1 year. We're talking everything from cars and coffee to software and haircuts. It's basically the main scorecard we use to see how an economy is doing. So how do we actually add all that up?
Well, it boils down to this really simple but super powerful formula. GDP equals consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. It looks a little like a math problem, but really it's just a way of tracking where all the money goes in an economy. Let's break that down real quick.
First up, you've got C for consumption. This is the biggest piece of the whole puzzle. It's all the money that you, me, and everyone else spends every single day. The groceries you bought, that movie ticket, your new phone. Yep, that's all consumption. It's what really drives the economy.
Next, we have I for investment. And a heads up, in this context, we're not talking about stocks and bonds. This is about businesses spending money on things that will help them produce more stuff later. Think about a factory buying new robots, or a tech company building a massive new data center.
Then comes G for government spending. This one's pretty straightforward. It's basically everything that government spends money on to keep the country running, from building new roads and funding schools to paying the salaries of public workers.
And finally, there's NX, for net exports. This little piece of the puzzle is how we factor in trade with the rest of the world. All you do is take the value of everything the country sells to other countries, its exports, and subtract the value of everything it buys from them, its imports.
Okay, so measuring the economy is one thing, but managing it, well, that brings us to one of the biggest challenges in all of macroeconomics: inflation. It's that feeling you get when you look at your wallet and it just feels like your money isn't going as far as it did before.
I absolutely love this definition from G. Crowther because it's just so clear. Inflation is just when the value of money goes down, which means prices, on average, have to go up. $1 today just buys you less than $1 did yesterday. Simple as that. But what actually causes it? Usually, inflation gets going because of two main forces. On one side, you've got what's called demand-pull inflation. This is the classic too much money chasing too few goods scenario. When everyone is trying to buy stuff and there just isn't enough to go around, prices get pulled up. Then on the other side, you have cost-push inflation. This happens when it just gets more expensive for businesses to make things. Maybe the cost of raw materials or wages goes up. They then push those extra costs onto us, the consumers, by raising prices.
So, when you're facing down problems like rising inflation or an economy that's slowing down, what can you actually do? Well, it turns out that governments and central banks have a whole set of tools they can use to try and steer things in the right direction.
The first toolbox belongs to the central bank, and it's called monetary policy. The bank's main job is to control the money supply. They can do this in a few key ways. First, they can adjust interest rates, which makes it either cheaper or more expensive for people and businesses to borrow money. Second, they do something called open market operations, which sounds fancy, but it just means they buy or sell government bonds to either put more cash into the economy or take some out. And finally, they set reserve ratios, telling banks exactly how much cash they have to keep on hand versus how much they can lend out.
The second toolbox belongs to the government itself, and this is called fiscal policy. The government can pull some big levers here. It can adjust taxes, cutting them to get people to spend more or raising them to cool things down. It can also ramp up its own spending on huge projects or borrow money to fund its plans.
Now, you'd think with all these tools at their disposal, managing an economy would be pretty straightforward. But the reality is, it's this incredibly delicate, constant balancing act that is just full of challenges.
See, the thing is, these tools are not magic wands. For one, there are huge time lags. A central bank might raise interest rates today, but it could be 6 months, maybe even longer, before it actually has an effect on the economy. And forecasting, it's incredibly difficult to predict the future accurately. And then you get hit with totally unexpected shocks. I mean, think about the pandemic. Things like that can throw even the most careful plans right out the window. It's a constant game of adapting and reacting.
And that really leaves us with a huge question to ponder. As our world gets more and more complex, more interconnected, and as we face brand new challenges, from AI to climate change, are these classic macroeconomic tools that we've been using for decades still going to be enough to build the economy of tomorrow?